Alrighty, so diving into the very first tip, when you finish the tutorial, intro cinematic, and you can actually control your character, obviously you won't be here, you'll be at the very beginning of the game. But either way, wherever you're placed, you're going to go ahead and pull up the menu screen because we need to turn on two really important settings that will make a massive difference in your gameplay. Once you open up the settings menu, if you're on PC, you can click the escape button, or if you're on the console, I'm assuming it's the two menu buttons. You might have to figure out which one opens it up. But either way, you're going to open up the menu and we're going to go to the options section, and then underneath options at the very top we've got graphics, sound, and then gameplay. We're going to click on gameplay, and then from here this is where we're going to turn on the two important settings. The very first one is the advanced tooltip compare. All right, and again, you can turn these on, and you turn them on by filling the box here, so there's not like a check mark. You gotta make sure you just have it filled. And then the second one right below that is the advanced tooltip information. Once again, you want to turn both of those on. Now what this actually does is if you open up your menu screen on any piece of gear, you might not have a whole lot because you just started off into the game, but either way, on any piece of gear, this gives you the minimum and maximum stat value that piece of gear can roll, and it really helps you compare to tell if that gear is actually a really good one, or if it's a trash piece and you should just break it down or sell it. To give you an example, take a look at these bone weave threads, these boots that I have pulled up that are legendary. You can see that it gives a 17% fire resistance. We can then see onto the right hand side of that it could have rolled as low as of 9.5%, and it could have rolled as high as 17%. So right off the bat, I got the highest fire resistant percentage roll that we could have gotten on this piece. Same thing goes for the other substats you can see here for willpower, the intellect. We can see that we only got a 9. It could have rolled up to a 14. And this also works for the affixes on the legendary gear. You can see that at the very bottom it says Flame Shield lets you move unhindered through enemies, and then the enemies you move through while Flame Shield is active are immobilized for blank seconds. You can see that I rolled a 2.7, and you can see that we could have gotten as low as a 2 second, and we could have gotten as high as a 3 second. So a little bit on the higher side when it comes to the overall roll, but it's not quite the best roll that I could have received. And the second setting actually does a full comparison of what you are losing by swapping from one piece of gear to another. So to give you an example here, I've got a rare pants pulled up on the left hand side and a legendary pair of pants on the right. If I scroll down utilizing my mouse wheel, it'll actually show you at the very bottom properties lost when equipped. It literally lays out every single thing that I'm going to be losing, and this is a very awesome feature because it allows you to quickly get an idea of, is this piece of gear actually better than the one that you're currently using. Both of these settings make it very easy for you to determine which piece of gear is better than another, or not only that, if the affix that you rolled on that legendary piece of gear is actually a minimum value or a maximum value. Obviously, when it comes to extracting affixes from legendaries, that's going to be a little bit advanced in another video in the future for a lot of you beginner players, but just know you want the higher stat value, right? You want to make sure you're trying to get the highest percentage closest to the max roll that you could have received when you do your extractions, so then you can utilize that max roll or higher roll on a higher piece of gear when you get a better legendary down the road. So absolutely going to be a game changer for both of these settings. Turn them on as soon as you start the game. Now diving into the second tip for this video, and that is which class should you choose. When you load into Diablo 4 for the very first time, by default, at least here at launch, there is only 5 classes. We've got the Barbarian, the Necromancer, the Sorcerer, the Rogue, and then last but not least, the Druid. Now you might be wondering, how is this a tip, or why is it in a tips video? And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, it's purely because there is a lot of news and content out there that is putting other classes down, right? They're doing class reviews stating that this class isn't really as strong as the other class. Maybe the Druid, is a little bit weaker and, taking more damage than you would expect in Werebear form, or not doing as much DPS in Werewolf form compared to somebody like a Sorcerer. Or I've even heard things like the Barbarian hits like a wet noodle and it's just simply pointless to use him. Either way, what I can tell you, as you guys being a new player diving into the game or the world of Diablo 4, I can promise you all 5 of these characters will be able to do every type of content in the game. You'll be able to beat the story mode, you'll be able to beat the capstone dungeons to increase your tier, level, your world tier level in order to, get those additional perks. You'll be able to beat the dungeons, you'll be able to beat world bosses, you name it. All 5 of these classes can do that. So I would not stress on picking which class is the better class out of all 5 of them. Instead, find the playstyle that you like and then pick that class. Additionally, I want to remind you that developers have said over and over again that they are going to always look to be balancing all of the individual characters. If they find that one class is way stronger than the other ones, then they're going to make adjustments, either by nerfing that class or buffing the other ones, or if there's something specifically wrong with a class that a lot of people aren't utilizing them or a lot of people are voicing their opinion on, then they're going to make adjustments to it to make it better. So absolutely don't feel bad about it. Pick and choose the class that fits your playstyle and then just play and enjoy the game. Now, diving into tip number 2, and that brings us to the world tiers question. This question is asked a ton throughout the Diablo 4 communities, but I'm going to answer it for you right now in this video. We've got 2 options that you can use and pick right at the start. We have the adventure option and we have the veteran option. The only difference between the adventure option and the veteran option are 3 things. 1, the enemies are more challenging. 2, the monsters that you kill give additional 20% increased experience to level up your character. And 3, the gold that drops from killing monsters is increased once again by 15%. As a new player diving into this game, as I expect you to be tuning into this starters, tips, and tricks video, I highly recommend just running it on World Tier 1 until you get really comfortable with the game's mechanics in the combat. You could be going up against a single boss or a single enemy at a time, and other times you could be going up against 20 or even 30 mobs, making it very overwhelming and very tough if you are on something like World Tier 2 Plus. So absolutely keep that in mind. I would run it on World Tier 1 to start off the game, especially as a new player. Now, speaking of world tiers and increasing your world tier, what I recommend for new players is play on World Tier 1 until you get to level 50. Once you hit level 50 and you have a good grasp on the overall game, I would then bump it up to the Veteran World Tier 2. The reason being is that you need to complete a capstone dungeon in order for you to eventually unlock World Tier 3. You might be wondering, well, why do you want to unlock World Tier 3? Well, if we go to the World Tier 3, the Nightmare mode, you can see that underneath the new section, we actually get 4 new gameplay features and mechanics that we can partake in that are going to be very, very fun at the in-game level. The very first one, obviously, is the sacred items, and the unique items have the ability to drop. These items are going to be better and more rare and unique than the legendary items. So you're going to be getting basically 2 more gear tiers beyond legendary by just going to World Tier 3. Additionally, we're going to be unlocking the Nightmare Sigils, which then are dropped, so then you can unlock Nightmare Dungeons. Again, another game mode that we can participate in. And then the third one here is the Hell Tides. Again, another awesome game mode that is going to be for in-game players. This is going to be a very great way to grind out individual gear. And then last but not least, we unlock champion monsters spawned throughout the entire world. That says monsters with damage resistance auras can also appear. So now that's going to be the reason why you want to unlock World Tier 3. But as I mentioned, you do have to beat the Cathedral of Light capstone dungeon in Kielfashad on the World Tier 2 Veteran. So that is going to be the reason why once you hit level 50, I would suggest swapping over to the Veteran World Tier 2. Not for the gold, not for the experience, but simply due to beating the Cathedral of Light capstone dungeon. And then once you do, then go ahead and bump it back up to the World Tier 3, so then you can unlock the additional gameplay mechanics. Far too often I see new players getting hung up on the 20% additional experience and 15% additional gold on the World Tier 2 when they first start in the game. And I can tell you right off the bat, I don't think it's worth it in my opinion. The amount of time it takes you to beat those enemies on World Tier 2 versus how fast that you can clear enemies and content in World Tier 1 don't really make a whole lot of difference when it comes to the experience gained and the gold gained versus lost from World Tier 1. So absolutely do that method. Stick to World Tier 1 until you hit level 50, swap to World Tier 2, then beat the capstone dungeon, and then there you go. You jump right into World Tier 3. Obviously, the enemies become harder, but you do unlock the additional content that the game has to offer. Now, diving into tip number 4, and that is don't get caught up in the numbers on your gear or get attached to specific gear. I see a lot of new players making this mistake when it comes to the early game progression or diving into Diablo 4 for the very first time. They're literally in Fractured Peaks running around, and every blue item, yellow item, or legendary that they pick up, they're looking at every little tiny detail, nitty-gritty thing. This is a positive, this is a negative, what am I swapping out? And yes, although that is needed for in-game, like you should absolutely be looking at that stuff early game, I would not stress that. Most of the gear that you're going to get, you'll replace in roughly an hour's time. So whatever you think that you might need to compare right now isn't really going to make a whole lot of difference, and those percentages are really small compared to what you're going to see at the in-game level, or when you start to really hone in on a specific build. Like I said, when you do get to that in-game, you're trying to min-max, or you're trying to perfect your playstyle to something specific, then that is the time that you should focus on all of those individual metrics. Instead, just enjoy playing the game. If you pick up an item and it has a majority of positives versus negatives, then I would honestly say just equip it, especially if you're not even at max level in the game yet and you're still in the early game. Just equip whatever is the better option, because you're going to replace it. Now, diving into the fifth and final tip I have for this video, and that is planning ahead when it comes to your inventory. When it comes to the massive amount of loot that you will have drop and fill your inventory in Diablo 4, it's important to understand that not only is gold important, but so is the materials you get from salvaging those individual items. Now, as for my rule of thumb when it comes to early game progression, or pretty much leveling through Diablo 4 until you hit the end game, is going to be this. I like to sell my gray items, my white items, and my blue items, because vendoring these items off will allow you to accumulate a hefty amount of gold, and you're going to need gold for a variety of different things in the game. Everything from upgrading items to increasing your potions to crafting gems, you name it, you're going to need a good amount of gold, and all three of these tiers will allow you to do that. Additionally here, that does mean that I like to salvage my yellows and my legendaries, especially if the legendaries don't have a good affix on them or it's a low quality roll. Either way, I like to break those down or salvage those items, because the resources and crafting materials you get from doing so, in my opinion, are far more valuable, because you're going to need those mid and late game. And by doing this early, as soon as you start in the game, will give you a head start when you do get to that point and you are looking for those materials. And that's officially going to wrap up our starter tips and tricks for new players diving into Diablo 4. As always, if you guys have any additional questions, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe here on the channel for everything Diablo 4. Also, I would like to invite you guys, if you have any additional tips or tricks for starter players, drop them down below in the comment section. Not only for myself, but any starter player diving into the game can go down there, read them for themselves. Maybe you might give them some additional tips and tricks that can help them on their adventure. With that being said, though, guys, as always, thank you for tuning in today, and I will see you in Sanctuary.